My normal microphone is broken, so I'm using this. And yes, I do feel like a local news reporter. Yes, thank you. A group of chihuahuas was stolen from this address in the early hours of the morning. The local police force says that they have no leads. That's a terrible joke, isn't it? I do apologise. Right, thank you for tuning in, and thank you also to MPB for sponsoring this video. More on them later. I don't get a chance to read all of my YouTube comments these days, but a couple of months back I posted a video all about a couple of weeks I spent in Cornwall with my Fujifilm X100VI, and I called that video something along the lines of, "This camera should cost more." And rather predictably, lots of people did not take the time to understand the context and the nuance of that title, and they just commented things like, "This camera is already expensive," which did tickle me. But there was also a comment, let me bring it up, talk amongst yourselves, which did pique my interest, and it's this. I probably could have memorised this. Could you explain why exactly it's more fun to shoot with this compared to Sony? What specifically is it that brings you more fun? Now, for some context, if you've not seen that video, I mentioned that one of the mornings I was in Cornwall, I took my Sony out with me, but within an hour or two, I switched back to the Fuji because I just found it more fun. And I thought about replying to that comment, but then realised quite quickly I didn't have a good answer as to why the Fuji was more fun than a Sony and what it is that really constitutes a fun camera. So in the couple of months since, I've tried to think about it, and this video is my attempt at answering that question. We'll see how we go. So, I am cycling up a hill close to where I live. What a guy. Quite a big hill, actually. This is the Great Orme here in Llandudno, and I'm currently, frankly, pretty out of shape. But it's okay because I'm cheating. This bike has a battery, which means even in my current state, I can get up hills like this with relative ease. And that would be particularly fantastic if I was, for example, on my way to the office without a change of clothes. But I'm not on my way to the office. Clearly, I don't have an office job. Look at the state of my beard. So I'm out, at least in part, for a sense of accomplishment. And technology solves many problems. But what I want to talk about today is whether or not technology can solve problems if what you're looking for is a sense of accomplishment. I'm not going to talk about bikes anymore, I want to talk about cameras, but I thought this was a pretty good example of what I want to talk about. And the heavens are opening. Guess who doesn't have a jacket? Yeah, a bit of a weird place to start, but stick with me. When I ride that bike, and I ride it uphill, I don't feel a sense of relief when I get to the top of the hill. I don't feel a rush of endorphins that you get from hard exercise. I don't feel a sense of achievement. Instead, I feel like I've spent an awful lot of money trying to solve a problem that actually I didn't really want solving. Because when I get to the top of a hill, I feel like a dull sense of disengagement. A sense that it wasn't really me that got me to the top of that hill. It was the bike. Now, earlier this year, we embarked on our third expedition to Antarctica, which is a ridiculous thing to say, and link in the description to our fourth expedition to Antarctica in 2028 if you think you'll fancy coming along. And frankly, as you might expect, those trips are a joke, really. We get put in front of the most jaw-dropping landscapes on a daily basis. And in my mind, at least, I'm travelling around, well, definitely the least visited continent in the world, but also the part of the world, I think, that feels least like Earth and more like another planet. It's amazing and a real privilege visiting Antarctica. Who'd have thought? But in the 3 months or so that we've been back from our last trip, I haven't really spent any time at all looking at the photos that I took on our last trip. And the reason for that, I put down to the camera that I used on that trip. This is the Sony A1 II, Sony's flagship camera, and it's ridiculously fast. Sony have brought out a couple of stacked sensor cameras since this camera came out, or certainly at least one, but this is still by far the fastest. And on this camera, I was shooting often at sort of 20 frames a second. The autofocus never misses. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to focus on a bird's eye or a whale's tail or the foot of a mountain, it just works. The IBIS is incredible. I was shooting full RAW. You literally never notice any buffering whatsoever. And I didn't really even have to compose because I was shooting 50 megapixel files. So if I didn't like my composition, I could just crop afterwards. And actually, the camera was taking lots of photos, thousands of photos, that I wasn't taking because it has pre-capture. So it was taking lots of photos before I even pressed the shutter. And it's a phenomenal camera and a technological marvel as far as I'm concerned, but there were several points on the trip where I sort of expected it to turn around to me and say, James, just go home. I actually don't need you. Go make a cup of tea, put your feet up. You are useless. And basically, long story short, the photos I took on that trip, it doesn't really feel like I took them at all. It feels like the camera took them. And I feel the same sort of dull sense of disengagement using that camera that I feel when I'm riding uphill on my battery-powered bike. I don't feel like it's me that's doing it. Now, if you make a living by invoicing people who've asked you to take certain kinds of pictures, whether that be couples getting married or marketing departments of big companies or newspapers, whatever it might be, a camera like this is fantastic because it's going to guarantee you more shots and ultimately it's going to get you paid. But what if you're not taking photos to get an invoice paid? What if you're taking photos for a sense of achievement, for that rare moment when you think, oh, wow, I did it? For the times where everything comes together and you get to use the skill that you've honed over years and years. What about then? Because I've come to realise that it's in those times where all the bells and whistles that you get on modern cameras, they lose their shine. Now, there is some important context here, which is to say that any camera, really, not just flagship Sony's, any camera is doing lots of the heavy lifting in the grand scheme of things. If you're a painter, for instance, you have to do a lot of the same pre-production that a photographer has to do. You have to go out, look for nice light, look for stories, look for things that are going to pique your interest, but then you have to sit down and paint those scenes. Whereas with a camera, you press a button and in a fraction of a second, you've documented whatever it is that you're trying to document. And so, compared to painting, for instance, even if you're using a film camera that doesn't have a battery in it, doesn't have a light meter in it, it's a big leg up on painting in lots of ways. So cameras are doing lots of the heavy lifting, they are doing lots of the work. But having thought about it a lot over the past couple of months, I think the fun cameras are the ones that at least give the illusion that you are needed as a photographer and that you are the one who is in control. And if you take one quick look at the X100, it's a camera that definitely gives you that feeling. It's a camera that has dials which are set up in a way to encourage you to use them. The dual EVF OVF encourages engagement. The fact that in camera you can vary the colours almost infinitely, even if you're shooting RAW, just for previews and reviews. The fact that the manual focus experience on this camera is really quite good. And all those things, I think, help the Fuji X100 and many other cameras besides feel engaging and therefore fun. Now, for a long time there has been a huge amount of debate about how much cameras matter. And YouTubers, people like me, will typically say things like, oh, cameras don't matter that much, they're just a tool. And they will then proceed to use the most expensive tools that money can buy. And understandably, lots of people will say, well, how can those two things be true at once? If cameras don't matter, why are you spending lots and lots and lots of money on them? And I would like to think on this channel now that I've made the point that I at least see basically no value in spending money on cameras for image quality these days. Within reason, obviously. I mean, you can still go on Amazon and buy an absolute potato of a camera and the image quality will not be good. But if you're spending half decent money on a new camera these days, the image quality is going to be great. You don't need to think about image quality. But cameras, quite clearly, are not just sensors. A sensor is part of a camera, but a camera is lots of other things and considerations besides. And how a camera feels in your hand, how it's constructed, the damping of the dials, the ergonomics, the placement of the buttons, the materials used, all of these things can bring joy. And I've come to the conclusion, eventually, and I used to be skeptical of this, that life is too short to use tools that don't bring you joy, if it's possible to find tools that do bring you joy. And cameras can absolutely bring me joy. And of course, there are photographers out there who don't really interact with their cameras all that much, certainly not in their hands. I know lots of landscape photographers who will go out with the camera in their backpack and they won't get it out of their backpack until they see something they want to photograph, and even then they'll stick it on a tripod. They won't really be holding the camera all that much. For me, if I go out for a day's photography, the camera is in my hands all day. And so how the camera feels in my hands, how it is to interact with, and the thousands of inputs that I'm getting from my camera that make up my experience with that camera, all of those things matter a great deal to me. So, what am I saying? I think cameras can be fun based on the stuff that I've talked about, and I'm not suggesting that it's worth going out and changing your camera to find a fun camera. I have spent ridiculous amounts of money over the years chasing fun cameras, and I do have some cameras that I think are fun now, but it's cost me a huge amount of money to get there. I'm not suggesting that you go through that process. Now, if your camera ever breaks and you're shopping for a new camera, definitely think about these things, but I'm not suggesting it's imperative that you go and change your camera now. What I am saying, though, is that you might not need to change your camera at all, because I think there are lots of things you can do to your camera, regardless of what it is now, that can help it to feel more engaging. So number one, turn off all the screen aids. Get rid of the grids, get rid of the leveling tool, get rid of the histogram, get rid of the overexposure warnings. Remove all of the clutter that you see on your screen or in your EVF. Because in my opinion, those things are there to kind of make your life as a photographer easier in a way that I, personally, don't want my life made easier. And not having grids or a level gauge or exposure warnings, it forces me to think about these things myself. And that's more fun. Number two, shoot single frames. Get rid of burst shooting altogether. Maybe not one for wildlife photographers, this one. But I don't think it's controversial to say that photography, in so many ways, is harder than video. Because in photography, quite obviously, you've only got a single frame to play with to convey whatever your message is. And the challenge of that, I find, again, incredibly engaging. And when I was in Antarctica shooting 20 frames a second, I realized really what I was doing was shooting very high resolution video. And when I got home, I just had this feeling that I'd cheated. Because again, I was robbing myself of the satisfaction you get from thinking, I got that moment perfectly. Because the reality is I didn't. The camera got that moment perfectly. Number three, turn off auto review. I find I get really sucked into chimping. Particularly if I'm shooting things that I'm quite excited about. I'll take a photo and then immediately I want to look at that photo on the back of my camera. The problem is that pulls me right out of the process and I risk missing something that could improve on my photo. Number four, a bit of a weird one this. When I shoot with old cameras, I realise how much screens and screen brightness has come on, leaps and bounds. And now if you're shooting with a modern camera, even in bright daylight, you can see exactly what your scene looks like, either on your screen or on your EVF. I have found it's much more engaging for that not to be an option and to turn down the brightness of those screens so that it becomes a little bit more guesswork. Now you might think that's mad, but it's another thing that engages me in the process to really hone my concentration on what it is that I'm doing. Number five, are we on number five? I think we are. A bit of a weird one, this one, and not to do with the camera. If you shoot with lenses that have aperture rings, use those aperture rings. For whatever reason, bringing your left hand into the process, for me at least, seems to make me feel more engaged. And it's much the same thing when I'm using an M-mount lens, for instance, on my SL3. The process of zone focusing with my left hand makes me feel much more like I am needed. I suppose with manual focus you aren't needed. Try manual focus. That's another good one. And lastly, number six, again, another sort of lens-based one rather than camera, but use a prime lens. That, to be honest, is probably the most powerful way to feel more engaged in the process. You have to move your body more, you have to think an awful lot more about composition when you're shooting with one focal length. And you don't need a prime. If you've got a zoom lens, just restrict yourself to one focal length with that zoom lens. I find that a very powerful way to feel part of the process. I think that's it. If you think of any other ways to feel engaged in the process, please let me know in the comments. I will read the comments in this video. Definitely. Right, that is a very long-winded way of trying to answer the question, what constitutes a fun camera? I hope it helps. Also, a giant thank you to the sponsor of this week's video, MPB. I have just bought perhaps one of my favourite things ever on MPB. It's not a camera, it's an accessory, and I'll reveal all in the next video. But MPB is a fantastic place to both buy and sell used camera gear. I've just sold a camera and a couple of lenses on MPB. It couldn't have been simpler. I went online, I got a quote, I was happy with that quote given that MPB does all of the legwork of selling equipment. They then arranged for a courier to come to my house to collect the kit fully insured. They inspected it within a couple of days and I got paid the next day. Fantastic service, and as I say, I've bought something very exciting on MPB as well. So if you're in the market to either buy or sell used camera gear, definitely check out MPB first. Links in the description. And I'm excited to show you what I've bought. I'm not holding out on you either. It's just not here. Otherwise I would show you. But yeah, next video. Anyway, as I say, big thank you for watching. I kept you for far too long. See you next time. Cheers. Hello. How's it going? It's been a couple of weeks since I filmed what you've just watched. And in that couple of weeks, I have been using the A1 II. Again, stupid name for a camera, but I've been using it a bit more with a touch more success as far as a feeling of engagement goes, thanks to a couple of little tweaks that I've made. So I thought I'd tell you about them quickly, since all I've done is really talk smack about this camera. Is that what the kids say? Talk smack? The first little change I've made is to shoot much more with the mechanical shutter on this camera, which, as I see it, has two major benefits. Firstly, you get some feedback when you take a photo. You get a physical jolt through the camera, as you often do with a mechanical shutter, which I really quite like. Makes me feel like something physical is happening within the camera, because it is, as opposed to an electronic shutter where, well, it doesn't make a sound, or if it does make a sound, it's a fake, tinny, horrible sound. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, second benefit of using mechanical shutter, is that it turns off by default lots of the clever stuff. So you can't access pre-capture, for instance, with a mechanical shutter. You can't shoot at really high burst rates. So in my mode number 1 on the top dial, I've got it set up as a much sort of dumber camera. And then the other modes I've got set up with all the clever stuff in case I ever need it, but I rarely do, really. If it's not become clear already, this camera is it's massive overkill for me. And then what was the other? Oh yes, so this has got one of those fancy screens from Sony which flips every which way, but I have been putting it away, so I've not been using the screen at all, which has been really nice. And those two changes actually have made this camera feel a little bit more fun. So yeah, there we go. Maybe there's hope for me in this camera yet. It is a phenomenal camera, as I've said. I just need to learn to love it, perhaps. Anyway, I've talked about cameras a lot in this video, and a lot this year, actually. I've got a couple more camera videos to come, and then I'm going to give it a rest for a while. But I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.